Stalled time 1. The signs of a frozen world. It was exactly 4 in the morning. The humid, weak orange light cast by a lone, old street lamp was dampening the city's wet asphalt. The bronze second hand of the clock tower halted just above the numeral 4, leaving a minuscule gap. This halt was not merely a mechanical failure, it was the collapse of the invisible axis that sustained the world's movement. The chill wind that had just brushed my right hand, the clarity of the dawn air entering my lungs, all these things were instantly solidified. The world suddenly transformed into a gigantic sculpture cast in silent, silver lead. A pedestrian I was about to pass was captured mid-stride, his left foot hovering in the air, the collar of his shirt frozen in the subtle ripple of a flutter. The faint discontent over yesterday's news, or perhaps the dullness of being half asleep, was preserved perfectly on his face. A tiny droplet near his eye, which might have been morning dew or a residue of last night's regret, defied gravity and inertia, suspended transparently in the air. I stopped. No, I was able to move. While my breath and my heart beat in a strange rhythm, everything else around me was motionless, like a photograph where the shortest fraction of a second has been stretched into eternity. This was a place where every fleeting moment was dead and preserved. The flow of time I had lived, the proof of its finiteness, was being utterly denied. I reached out and touched the frozen pedestrian's shoulder. It was cold, hard, and devoid of the resilience of a living thing. He was destined to stand there forever, just past the numeral 4, with his left foot raised and that subtle expression intact. This sight was less a horror and more a profound philosophical weight. Only my breath created a faint ripple in this vast and unmoving expanse. Like an observer trapped in a microscopic tank, I alone floated upon the surface of this frozen time. 2. The echo chamber of regret, the stopping of time, did not mean the distortion of space. Rather, it meant perfect preservation. In this static air, I felt a freedom, having shed the constraints of the body, but I soon realized I was trapped in an internal prison. My thoughts were trapped in an eternal dance. This dance was a loop created by regret and attachment, a rewind. I left the frozen pedestrian behind and walked on. No one saw me, and nothing obstructed my path. Only the sound of my footsteps, breaking the leaden silence, echoed around me. And unconsciously, I was walking on the pavement of a year ago. Though time had stopped, the map of my memory guided me to the most painful and pivotal moment. The spot was a bench beneath an old street lamp. It was the exact place where, a year ago, I had failed to utter the most important words, swallowing them instead out of cowardice and foolishness. In the stilled time, I stood before that bench again. She was still there, preserved, wearing a light coat and frozen just as she was about to open her mouth to smile. My reflection in her eyes was the me of a year ago, and that gaze seemed to offer me one last chance. I sat before her and cried out toward her solidified lips and silenced voice. "I'm sorry. I should have held on to you then. I love you." But the cry returned only to me, like a whisper in an echo chamber. Her expression did not change, and her lips remained sealed. I saw the ghost of a smile, but it was lifeless. This stalled time did not allow me a different ending. It only permitted the infinite, amplified experience of past pain. I repeated the words I failed to let them know hundreds, thousands of times. But they never reached her. Because time had stopped, my message of regret remained an unfinished sentence, forever unsent. 3. The weight of solitude and the abyss of silence. When I rose from the bench, I felt extreme emotional inertia. My body was free, but my soul refused to move. The heavy air pressed down on all my actions, forever sealing the gap between hope and despair. The fact that time had stopped meant that there would be no change, no progress. I wandered into an unfamiliar alley. It was dominated by a serene apathy, like a still ocean that had forgotten the flow of time. No current pulls, no wind dares to blow free. Like a state of weightlessness in the deep sea, I drifted without purpose. I waited for the world to move, but the world maintained its perpetual silence. It was like a moment of perpetual dusk. The sun hung motionless on the horizon, and shadows maintained their bizarre poses, having lost all movement. The weight of the stillness crushed me. I had no idea how to waste the infinite day. I tried running, but it was no different from running in place. No matter how far I went, I remained perpetually close to that numeral 4. This was a labyrinth without an exit. I searched for a sign, but all the signposts were faded or distorted. Trapped in an unresponsive universe, I could hear only the echo of my own steps. That echo questioned me ceaselessly. What do you regret? Why did you stop? I returned to the bench and looked again at the frozen tear on the pedestrian's eye. A tear hangs high, unreached by his cheek. I carefully wiped it with my finger. The liquid was cold, and that chill was the temperature of sadness transferred to me. This solitude was not mine alone. This stalled time preserved the sadness, regret, and incompleteness of all existence forever. I had imprisoned myself within the structure of a frozen dream. 4. The thaw, the first subtle tremor. How much time had passed? A day, a year, or eternity? In a place where time could not be measured, its meaning vanished. I slumped powerlessly by the bench, enduring the endlessly looping memories of regret. It was the moment I believed no external force or internal will could make me move. It was then that I heard a very subtle sound. At first, I thought it was an auditory hallucination or a distortion of the silence, but it soon became clear. It was the sound of metal gently tapping metal, a faint first tick echoing from within a closed drawer. The sound did not come from the frozen clock tower. It came from within my chest. A fragile flutter in the frozen heart was born. The tremor was faint, yet it contained enough vitality to shake this entire leaden world. It was not my will or my strength. It was the melody of resurrection that allowed time to flow again. I felt the asphalt beneath my feet, which had been so rigid, develop a minuscule crack in the ice. The crack was invisible, but my senses recognized it as the sound of the rigid frame beginning to softly break. Like ice melting at the end of winter, the curtain of stagnation that had enveloped me was slowly lifting. I took a deep breath. The coldness of the dawn air entered my lungs again. This time, it was not the static coldness, but the vivid coldness of the flow returned. I smiled. It was a smile not of sadness or joy, but of release. I realized I could not live eternally in regret. Time had stalled, but within that time, I had finally found the most important thing, the inevitable next step. 5. Time continues. The crack grew. The collar of the frozen pedestrian's shirt began to gently flutter again. The suspended tear droplet finally followed the law of gravity and streamed down his cheek. The movement of that tear was a powerful and beautiful evidence that the world catches up. The ticking grew louder, and the second hand began to move. I stood up from the bench. I did not look back. The past was released, the future felt so new. Regret remained within me, but it was no longer a chain to bind me. It was a faint lantern illuminating the road ahead. The pavement stretches, now a forward view. Time had stalled, but within it I had finally found my pace again. I breathed out the past stagnation and fear, embracing the new rhythm of now. As I started to walk, the frozen pedestrian also put his left foot down and began to move. His face, instead of the earlier blankness, held the slight confusion of someone who had just returned to reality. I smiled at him, and he nodded in bewilderment. The silent statues soon will walk instead. Time had fully resumed. The clock tower began to chime, signaling 5 o'clock. I took my step. Time continues. It was an unstoppable current, and it was the greatest hope I had discovered in my most solitary moment. I had left the labyrinth, and the road was clearly ahead of me. All that remained was to keep walking. Stalled time. The clock hand aches upon the numeral 4, a breath suspended just before the door. The world is cast in silent, silver lead, where every fleeting moment is now dead. Within this vast and unmoving expanse, my thoughts are trapped in an eternal dance. I walk the pavement of a year ago, chasing the words I failed to let them know. The heavy air holds all my silent pleas, a still ocean beneath the frosted trees. No current pulls, no wind dares to blow free, only the solid weight of what if with me. A tear hangs high, a droplet of despair, reflecting stillness in the vacant air. The sun remains a mute and distant gleam, caught in the structure of a frozen dream. But deep inside, a tiny tick will start, a fragile flutter in the frozen heart. The rigid frame begins to softly break, the world remembers how it moves to wake. The pavement stretches, now a forward view, the past released, the future feels so new. Though time was stalled, the road is clear ahead, the silent statues soon will walk instead.